Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Front Page. We've got loads coming up to you on today's show, including picking the bones out of everything that happened at Cheltenham and elsewhere over the last week, and a big dispute between trainers and racecourses over whether they should be paid for interviews. To discuss all of that, Matt Rennie and Liam Head, very good to have you. Let's dive straight in, Matt. Let's talk about Trials Day, and the star of the show was the one and only Constitution Hill.
Yeah, we can start counting down to Cheltenham in earnest now, really, and he was the star of the show, wasn't he? He did as we expected him to do, but he did throw a nice little hiccup in at the final hurdle. I think a few people's hearts were in their mouths, most notably Nicky Henderson, owner Michael Buckley, and Nico de Boyville on board, but he dealt with it in aplomb in the end. And I just thought, yes, it wasn't a competitive race, but how great is it to see him back on the track, and all roads leading back to the champion hurdle now, and I don't think you can oppose him really at this stage. And even though he might be long odds on, isn't it brilliant we've got a superstar that's come back, hopefully, to his brilliant best now?
Well, it was fantastic to see him. I guess, did we learn anything? I mean, we obviously learned that he can fluff his lines a little bit, although he extricated himself from it pretty smoothly. But did we learn anything from that race?
I think we learned that he's got a brain, and he also knows what he can do. And to be fair to him, he was asked for a very long stride. Watching back the replays, and he was standing a mile off, and he worked out to negotiate very well. So we've seen that maybe it's not like a flaw in his armour, but there's a little something there to say he's still an equine horse rather than a superstar machine. But it was just brilliant to see him, back on the track after what happened last year. It wasn't obviously the greatest race in the world with respect to Brentford Hope. He's not going to be champion hurdle class, but without Lossiemouth there, it makes an interesting Dublin Racing Festival coming up as well. But Constitution Hill's the one they all have to beat, and flag bearer for the British team going into the festival.
Yeah, certainly is. Liam, you're our man in Lambourn. Constitution Hill, of course, the flag bearer, not just for British racing, but for Lambourn. How's Nicky feeling after the race on Saturday? Is he happy with everything he saw?
I think so. I mean, obviously, like Matt touched on, the heart and mouth moment towards the end of the race. I mean, even I was watching from afar, and even my heart was going when he came to that last hurdle. But I don't think we did learn. I don't think we did learn a lot from the race. I mean, he was heavily odds on. We knew he was, almost a certainty to win. We think, but he's a classy horse. Nicky Henderson was very happy after the race. To maintain that unbeaten record, and he's just a brilliant horse to watch, and it's great to see him back at the top level again. Yeah. So champion hurdle actually turning into potentially, touch wood, we don't have wood here, but never mind, touch wood, turning into quite a good race here, because we could have a real clash. I mean, Constitution Hill, of course, is odds-on favourite, but he hasn't, for all he's obviously come back strongly, he hasn't shown the same level of form as he did in 23 when he won the champion hurdle. Now that's partly because he's not faced sort of opposition that would potentially raise him to that level. But we've got Lossiemouth in there. Brighter Days Ahead could turn up. State Man. There's enough sort of competition there that suggests that this could actually be a hell of a race. Yeah,
and if I was the O'Learys with Brighter Days Ahead, I'd be looking at the win at the weekend and going, well, there's some way that Constitution Hill might have a tiny, tiny bit of a flaw there. If Brighter Days Ahead goes out from the front and does a demolition job like she did at Leopardstown over Christmas, she could be one of the first horses to put Constitution Hill's jumping right under pressure, because we know, as we saw from his jump when he won the champion hurdle 2 years ago, he stood off a mile and just about got over there. There's a fine line between that brilliance and that agony as well. Obviously, we saw with Annie Parr in the Mayor's Hurdle all those years ago. I mean, she should really be going for a champion hurdle anyway. To win an open grade 1 over 2 miles, it's a bit gutting that it seems like it's going to be the Mayor's Hurdle at this stage. But I'd be thinking, look, so the Constitution Hill's shown a small weakness there, a bit of clumsiness, shall we say. And a horse like Brighter Days Ahead could be good enough to make the most of that. Or we'd hope. That's what we'd want to find out. And it's a shame, in a way, that we might not find out in 6 weeks' time. But
I hope so. I mean, Brighter Days Ahead, only 2-1 with firms doing non-run and no bet, which speaks to the degree of confidence, I guess, that if she turned up, she would give a serious race to Constitution Hill. How do you see it? And obviously, Liam, we know you're hopelessly biased in this one towards the Lambourn horse.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Constitution Hill wins the champion hurdle. I'm clear as day about that one. But I think if Brighter Days Ahead if she does go for the champion hurdle, I think she would pose the biggest threat to his unbeaten record. I think we've seen at Kempton, obviously, in the Christmas hurdle with Lossiemouth. That was the time when Constitution Hill was most likely to get beat, first time back after a year out, and Lossiemouth just couldn't get near Constitution Hill. We don't know the full reasons behind that. Willie Mullins, obviously, we may see Lossiemouth again before March, but I think Bright Days Ahead is slightly going under the radar in terms of the contenders for the champion hurdle.
And just to give Gigginstown credit where it's due, and Gordon Elliott, they obviously pitched Apples Jade into the champion hurdle when they didn't have to, and it didn't work out for them, but I dare say Brighter Days Ahead is miles better than what Apples Jade was, because Apples Jade's run came after being beaten in the Mares Hurdle the year before, whereas Brighter Days Ahead stock is limitless at the moment. So
yeah. For the sake of the sport,
please
go for the champion hurdle. Well, let's turn to the Gold Cup, where we had Lambourn winning in the Coxcroll Chase, cut into sort of 20-1 for the Gold Cup. Sort of essentially, very clearly, Britain's number one contender for the big race, especially now Dan Skelton said that Grey Dawning will not run in the Gold Cup this year. What do we make of it?
Yeah, it's a shame that Grey Dawning's not going, but it's not surprising in a way. The form of the Turners last year, the first and the seconds completely fallen apart. Ginny's Destiny was Stonewall last in a handicap chase at Cheltenham on Saturday, and the form of the Betfair Chase, in which he was a good second in, not working out great either. So it's a shame, but we want the best of the best to turn up, and I really do like Lambourn. I mean, he's only been beaten once at Cheltenham, and that was a terrific run in the Gold Cup in defeat last year when fourth. I dare say he hasn't got enough to beat Galopin de Champs. 15
lengths behind last year.
Yeah, and he's
probably
setting the standard of the British chasing division at the moment. If you go on his King George III behind Banbridge training in Ireland, Ile-France training in France, obviously. Yeah, it's a substandard staying chasing division for Britain this year, and I can see him running maybe each way at best. But it was good to see him get back to winning ways. Good to see Stage Star run really well, because he looks like Aintree's going to be made for him. To be fair. They love him fresh. He's a hard horse to pick, to be honest with you, to get right, but it doesn't scream Gold Cup winning form. But to the point we're just making about Brighter Days Ahead, fair play to Connections for saying, as they have done quite clearly, look, we're going to go for the Gold Cup, and that's it, because you got to take your chances, don't you?
Yeah, I mean it's the biggest race of the festival. You want to have a fighting chance, and like you said, credit where credit's due with Connections. It was a fantastic performance. We know what Lambourn can do on his day. We've seen that on Saturday. So let's hope someone can put up a fight, but you're asking an awful lot to find up those lengths to Galopin de Champs.
What about East India Doc? What do we think?
Love him.
Yeah?
Absolutely love him. I think he beats Loulamber. I think he really does beat
3-1's a big price. You
sort
of think,
price.
There's a bit of the old, if he was trained by someone else at somewhere else.
Different yellow-dominated colours in a different area in the West Country rather than East Country. But no, I really, really do love him. I was just really struck by how well he gallops on Saturday up the hill, and it's a race that has a good record in the trial, producing top-class horses. Obviously, Sergino won it last year, but was denied that opportunity. Defi de Soy's won it before. I'd be far happier taking the price on him than I would Loulamber at the moment in terms of experience as well. So. And it'd be great for James Owen. He's just a terrific trainer when it comes to both flat and jumps. I mean, I don't know how many trainers will be able to do the Triumph Hurdle and the Derby Double this year, possibly, but he's going to be giving it a go. But I really, really like East India Doc. Proper horse.
Anything else catch your eye at Cheltenham, gents?
I think just following on from what Matt said about East India Doc, I think that was probably the performance of the weekend. Really, I mean. James Owen has done a fantastic job. We know he can, and that triumph is getting very interesting now.
Certainly is.
It wasn't Cheltenham, but what struck me was at Naas. Obviously, Joe Marie Donnelly have got a enviable team, shall we say, for Cheltenham this year, to say the least. I was writing some down. Obviously, Salvatore Mundi in the Supreme, Sergino, Amsterdam winning at Naas. Obviously, he might go to Aintree, State Man, Loulamber, and Dancing City obviously winning the Novice Chase at Naas, who I think tailor-made for the Brown Advisory. He isn't flashy, but you don't need these sort of horses. You need those industrial horses who are going to gallop all day, and that's all he does. He's a lovely horse, and I'm sure he's a pretty easiest ride when he's fit and tip-top form on the track. So keep an eye on that. Well, it's pretty obvious Dancing City's a good horse, but They've obviously got Ballyburn in there, Mr. Mullins, but I'd much rather be on Dancing City, who's, I'd say, a bit more tough and proven for that 3 mile test, because it's usually quite soft on the second day as well, so he could relish in it.
When you said what caught your eye was at Nace, I thought you were going to say your Toxter. And
yeah, I think they've got many people's eyes, didn't it?
Evan Williams and Owl of Athens. So I've got the numbers here. Went off 85 to 40 favourite. Haven't been available at 80 to 1 in the morning. I think that's very, very early morning. Beaten 277 lengths in 7 previous starts. But there was obviously confidence there. Evan Williams said, it'd be very interesting to know the ins and outs of it all. One of the owners had £20 each way.
You might be better placed for this one because you were
I had to make that call, yeah. It was interesting. I mean, a gamble like that, you know, it's huge. I mean, obviously I think a lot more money went on it than a £20 each way, but like you said, the last 6 or 7 starts, beating 277 lengths to go and win the way he did, I just nobody saw that coming clearly. Well, clearly people did, obviously. But
far from it.
Yeah,
far from it. I said yes. Yes.
But it was very interesting.
It certainly was. I don't know if we'll ever learn the ins and outs of it all, but people will make their own conclusions. Palladium. We have to give a word to the German Derby winner.
Absolutely.
Most expensive jumps horse.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a great coup for British jumps racing that we've got a German Derby winner, a Group 1 on the flat. Yes, it's not the greatest Group 1 in the European pattern, but we've got a top class flat horse going over jumps again, and he's still an Entire as well. So that could be fascinating, hopefully in time for the jumps breed. I know Nicky said he wanted to have a go on the flat with him in the summer as well.
Royal Ascot or something.
Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it?
I think they were talking, was it the Adonis at Kempton
that's next up,
and then possibly the Triumph. So, you know, if that plan comes to fruition and we see Palladium at Cheltenham and then a Royal Ascot, like, it's a brilliant thing for racing fans and for British racing fans.
Well, as a German Derby winner and an Entire who could go on soft ground as well, Nicky could be eyeing up the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe in October as well.
There we go.
That's what you think. But it's great for the sport to have this uniqueness. And obviously, it's incredibly expensive. That's a storyline in its own right. 1.4 million euros at Arcana, but an Entire going over hurdles as well, with hopefully future stallion prospects, especially in a bloodstock commercial breed where speed and precocity is so regularly sought after these days as well. It could be quite big for shaping the jumps breed in the future. Hopefully, if all goes well and he delivers.
Just very intriguing as well, and which is what the sport needs. We need stories that capture the imagination, which is a neat enough segue into our second story today, which is concerning the story that we broke in the Racing Post on Saturday, that a group representing trainers are threatening to boycott TV interviews if they're not paid for conducting them. This, of course, is the Professional Racing Association run by ex-BHP boss Peter Saville, and it's a sort of breakaway group to the National Trainers Federation. They've apparently contacted media rights company Racecourse Media Group on behalf of its membership, asking for a payment of £500,000 in return to agreeing to give TV interviews from February 1. They've also apparently contacted Sky with a similar request, and ITV is aware of the situation but is apparently not being asked for payment themselves. So, fair to say, the response to this was one of incredulity on social media, wasn't it, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, for me, I'm perplexed at the whole timing of it all. Just firstly, what the trainers are asking for, you know, to ask to be paid for TV interviews. You know, those TV interviews for the average Joe who sits at home on a Saturday and is just getting into the sport. Those interviews can sort of entice people to get further into the sport. You know, it brings out so much colour, some of these interviews before and after the races, and the whole time of it just doesn't really sit well with me. I'm not sure where this will go, how far it'll go on for, but it's just very, very disappointing to see at this stage.
Well, let's see a selection of some of the reaction here. Nevin Truesdale, former chief executive of the Jockey Club, called it a totally misguided stance. The sport needs to pull every lever to promote itself. Kentucky Derby winning trainer Kelly McPeak said, "I'm trying to understand this one, ? Help me. Wouldn't a well-spoken interview be an opportunity to explain to customers your plan and possibly grow your business and the sport. Nick Luck said partying like it's 2005 and referenced a previous boycott when John Dunlop broke the picket line at Goodwood. We should also say that NTF, the National Trainers Federation, has kind of come out to explain that it's firmly against this, that they believe that at a time when the sport's revenues are under threat, stakeholders need to work together rather than against each other and put the customer at the forefront of their activity. I mean, that's it, isn't it? First of all, I think Kenny McPeak's absolutely right that it's an opportunity to sell your business, but the sport needs all the help it can get right now.
Exactly that. The sport, no doubt about it, is in one of the darkest periods that it's ever been, and I don't get why this has been the hill to die on, because we've got a sport that's going to and is being badly impacted by affordability checks, where that is the main issue within the sport, is that ordinary punters cannot get a bet on the lifeblood of our sport, are struggling to place bets on due to draconian levels of checks on finances. And that's what we should all be uniting behind, and then we can divulge into the other issues. If you were to have a checklist of what issues need to be resolved within the sport, being paid for interviews on course after a winner would probably be very much at the bottom of the list. You'd obviously have affordability checks up there, then the levy, and then prize money is obviously still a massive
and just
issue.
The audience, racing needs more fans. We need to expand the audience.
We're in an incredibly lucky position compared to some other sports, especially the sport we're in, a game sport, that we have this unique position on terrestrial TV every weekend, mainly on a Saturday and a Sunday now, because ITV is showing far more races than I think plenty of other terrestrial TV broadcasters have done before. We're incredibly lucky as a sport if we even make it onto the BBC News, let alone 3 times a year. The Gold Cup might get a 10-second segment at the end of the sports show in March, and we're sort of firebombing it by refusing to do interviews. If we could have an example where, after the Gold Cup, a trainer will refuse to be interviewed for winning the Gold Cup.
Would they though?
That's the big question.
I mean, can you imagine? Honestly,
it'd be one of the most ridiculous things you'd see on the sport, and I almost think it's almost ridiculous we're talking about it, to be honest with you, in terms of issues that are going on within the sport. And I don't know, I find it just flabbergasting, to be honest with you. I saw there were some comparisons in there to Sky Sports paying footballers and football teams and managers, but the revenue they bring in compared to what racing does, we're a minority sport compared to football. The revenue they'll bring is astronomical, and they'll be in a really healthy position where they can afford to pay for these interviews and stuff. We're nowhere near there. We're never going to be there. So why on earth it's come out now, I don't know. I hope for everyone's sake that it's going to be resolved quite by peaceful manners, because trainer interviews, some of them you get are absolute gems on TV.
Yeah, and we should say trainers give fantastic insight, and they're incredibly open in racing, and we're very privileged as journalists that we're able to call up some of the biggest names of the sport, and they'll freely give their time. So first and foremost, I think you've got to be clear that the media and the fans are grateful for the sort of access and insight given. But it's a two-way thing, because the trainers are benefiting as well, because they all own small businesses basically, or some of them not so small businesses. So I mean, Peter Saville sort of defending it sort of said, imagine a movie producer saying to Leonardo DiCaprio that we won't pay you, you should be grateful for the exposure we provide. But the fundamental misunderstanding there is that it's not about Leonardo DiCaprio not getting paid for a film, it's about Leonardo DiCaprio not getting paid for an interview to promote the film. So
there's a big difference, isn't there?
It's a big difference.
And like you said, it's an opportunity to sell your business. You can only imagine if a trainer wins the Gold Cup and doesn't give an interview after the race, or before the race talking about it. But you've got to think of, the owners. The owners might not be happy with the trainer not speaking to the TV.
And sponsors as well.
And sponsors
is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Skelton's come out to back this. Dan's sponsored by Ladbrokes, I think. I mean, they won't be thrilled if Dan declines to go on TV on the biggest occasions, and thereby doesn't give exposure to the man. So there's a lot of consequences. I actually think the biggest thing here is that if you're a small trainer and you're being asked to follow everyone else on this, the impact is surely disproportionately greater for you, because Dan Skelton, Nicky Henderson, etc. probably don't need a huge amount of exposure in order to get their name out there. Everyone knows them. They're the leaders in their field. But if you're a smaller trainer, someone breaking through in the game, James Owen, for example, it's much more important.
Yeah, well, I was speaking to a trainer. I won't name them, but I was speaking to them a few weeks ago after they had a terrific period over Christmas, and they were like, "It's amazing. We've got local BBC coming down to film at the yard, the radio, even local newspapers coming up there, and even getting into the local papers and local broadcasting is a huge success for us." And I dare say that should be the outlook we have on it, because we do have this unique position where in a sport where we can broadcast this sort of this special bond between horses and humans, really, because obviously the horses can't talk, whereas F1 drivers and footballers can. And I just think it'd be a real shame to break it at such an unneeded point when there are bigger things that need more perspective on, that we need to have more perspective on. So, I don't know, it's just, it wasn't expected to come up last week.
No, it was a big surprise.
Yeah.
February 1 is when they've said they will begin boycotting interviews if they're not given this payment. Every indication thus far is that the racecourses are not minded to negotiate. So we're going to find out if someone blinks or a boycott goes ahead. I think if a boycott does go ahead, it will probably end like 2005, where it sort of collapses in a lack of a unified front. But we'll see. We had another interesting story this week where a bit of a common theme. British trainer, in this case Brian Drew, owner of Brave Man's Game, decides they've had enough with low prize money, dysfunctional economics, etc., and they're decamping for foreign shores. In his case, more horses in Ireland and France. Unusually, though, this time there was a defence of the sport where Jed Mason and Max McNeil, two other significant British owners, came out and said, actually British racing has lots going for it. The prize money is not that bad, particularly in relation to Ireland, and that the prestige and heritage of the sport are big draws. We've seen plenty of owners leave the sport, and I suppose a trickle moving abroad, but it's kind of rare to see people coming out and defending it in Britain, which was quite refreshing. It
was, yeah. I think there's still plenty of fundamental issues that are wrong with British racing, namely there is too much of it at the moment, and it's such a bloated fixture list that we do get these uncompetitive races for peanuts. And ironically, maybe that should be something the PRA should put all their energy into. I'm sure they have done. They are doing as well. But it was nice. Obviously, the prestige element. It's a tricky one, ownership, isn't it? Because if you're coming into it with a view to make a profit, you're probably not going to make a profit. It's just what ownership is. In owning, owning racehorses, you have to be at the very, very top if you're going to make. How to make a small fortune in horse racing. Start with a big one. Exactly that. And it is a great shame to see Brian Drew move a lot of his horses or move his attentions to Ireland. Obviously, he's got two with Willie Mullins, Fishery Lane and Final Demand. Obviously, who's running at the DRF this week, Final Demand, and he's high up in the Cheltenham Festival list. And that's probably essentially where the aim is. Yeah. Is they want a Cheltenham Festival winner. If you're a jumps owner, that is what you want, no matter what people say. And Ireland are the dominant force at the moment. Yeah, I mean they are clearly. But I totally understand why people would want to go and have a horse of Willie Mullins. But I just think have some imagination at this point. It's like everyone's sending their horses to Willie Mullins. He clearly is an exceptional trainer. He's not the only person who can train winners at Cheltenham. I just don't get it. I don't get it. If you had a horse, where would you have it? Oh, it'd be in the north somewhere, but I'm biased because I live in York. But I'd love to see the north have a star back among its ranks. Obviously, we've got the real whacker up there at the moment, but a real superstar would bring back a lot of people's nostalgia. Northern racing, sadly, Northern jumps racing specifically, is slightly on the ignored during this time of the year, really. It's all southern dominated, bar the fighting fifth hurdle. So I'd have it there, and I like that sort of emotional element of let's give a smaller trainer a chance, see what they can do with a big horse. Yeah. A big yard's not for me. Then it's good to see Max McNeil and Jed Mason obviously speak about promoting British racing, because that's what we need, because we have had a good jump season so far. Let's bring back Constitution Hill's back with a bang. So Gino was brilliant in the fighting fifth hurdle.
Great Christmas period as well, wasn't
Great
it?
Christmas
Real
hurdle.
feel-good feel about things. Crowds were up. It just seemed like, I mean, I hesitate to say this, British racing has turned a corner, but it feels like the oil tanker's beginning to turn.
Bar the fog at Christmas, you had everything you probably and possibly could have wanted from the Christmas period, really, couldn't you? A thrilling King George, where someone thought they were going to tank their way to victory and then emptied. The best hurdler in the world currently, he's back to his best due to Gino beating Ballyburn in a sort of a clash of the ages. So I'm glad people are coming out to defend it, because it's not all doom and gloom, and hopefully, as people say, it swings and roundabouts. Hopefully, the period we've had in the racing calendar in Britain is showing that it is turning for a positive again. And I think we'll have a good Cheltenham Festival this year, actually. So
that's just Tom Segal. He's very bullish.
Yeah. I'm very much agreeing with Mr. Price-wise.
I'm not going to ask you where you'd have a horse, Liam, because if you didn't have a horse in Lambourn, I think you've chased out the village.
Yeah,
and I simultaneously am not going to ask you who you'd have it with, because it seems a dangerous gun. Here's one. French racing. So lots of people talk about moving to have horses in France now. Obviously, the prize money is fantastic. I just think, so I was in Lambourn a few weeks ago. I was up in the Gallops. Warren Greatrix kindly took us up there, and it's a beautiful morning. You're in one of the most picturesque corners of Britain, and if you live in a sort of 100-mile radius of that, so you can go there and fairly regular, see your horse. I don't understand why you would choose to have a horse trained in France, where, nothing against France, a wonderful country, tremendous racing, great food, beautiful training centres, what's not to like, but realistically you're not going to be able to go and see them anywhere like as frequently as you could do if you had it closer to home.
No, definitely not. And I think, like you touched on there, that the radius, if you had a horse that trained in Lambourn and you lived sort of 60 miles from Lambourn, you could go very frequently, and wherever that horse would run, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be at the racetrack seeing the horse. Whereas if you've got a horse trained, or if you own a horse that's trained in France, you're not going to make regular visits over. You may only go over when the horse races. So it's a fine line at the minute, but like we were touching on there over Christmas, there was a feel-good factor of racing in Britain. The crowd, the actual racing we got. So things are looking okay at the minute. There's obviously a lot of work to be done still to make things, much better, but I think it's very refreshing, as you said, to see these owners, big owners, come out and support the British racing.
It was. One last story before we wrap up this week, gents. Let's look at the beginning of last week, where we had the World Racing Awards, at which they announced the world's best racehorse and the world's best race. That was the Judgmont International, and jointly tied for the award was Laurel River and City of Troy. Liam, you were there reporting for the Racing Post. What did you make of the event?
It was great to go and see how these things operate. I'd never been to the Longines event before, but I must say that I was hoping for a little bit more. Given the fact that obviously they crowned the horse of the year, or joint horse of the year in this case this year, and the race of the year, but equally there was probably about 8 or 9 categories for awards this year, but we only seen 2 trophies presented on the stage. So I think that they could have been a bit more into it, inviting a few more winning connections up on the stage, talking about the season, to make it more of a staple of an event.
I think that's a sense that a few people who go to these events have, is that they're very nice, and who wouldn't enjoy the delightful surroundings of the Savoy Hotel in London, but they're probably in need of some modernisation, a little bit more jeopardy, a little bit more excitement, and ultimately we're crowning the best in the world. Lots of other sports make a big deal of that, and it becomes a very keenly contested title.
Yeah, and I think I suppose one other thing to say is the fact that you can keep track of the rankings throughout the year. So when it comes to the actual day itself, you kind of have an idea of which horse is in the running to be crowned Horse of the Year. So it kind of takes the shine a bit away from it.
In some years, it's blindingly obvious who's going to get it, isn't it? Yeah.
But it kind of takes the gloss away from it a little bit, because it would be nice to sort of to go there and into the unknown and have sort of 3 or 4 horses up for this top accolade, and we're finding out there and then who's won it. But in cases in recent times, as I said, we're coming to this stage of the year, and we kind of have an idea of who's won.
Yeah. Matt, you weren't there. You were obviously going to be watching the stream, which I understand had some technical difficulties, so I guess you missed it. But any reflections from your end?
Yeah, I did miss it. Obviously, City of Troy and Laurel River were the two that were the crown the horse of the years. I can understand it, and obviously it was richly deserved, but I wouldn't be having either of them as sort of in my category of flat greats. I know City of Troy sort of marketing wheel during the summer was highly spun, and fair play. He achieved a lot. Winning the Derby, the Eclipse, and the Juddmonte. It was a great day to be at York for the Juddmonte, and obviously rightly so. It is the world's best race, and regularly performs as the world's best race, and regularly delivers on the stage. I wouldn't be having City of Troy sort of a great in that category, in the category of elite flat race horses, though. Just thinking of some off the top of my head, obviously Golden Horn, I'd say would be one of the most underrated horses we've had in Britain, given what he achieved in winning the Derby, the Eclipse, the Irish Champion, and the Arc in a brilliant summer in 2015, nearly a decade ago now. But fair play to them. Obviously, Laurel River might have a bit to do to win his crown again. Obviously, he's beaten on his comeback in Dubai on Friday, but he has got the
odds on by a 66-1 shot.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly the greatest one, but to be fair, he has been beaten on his return before and bounced back, and he's got the chance to do so in just 2 of the richest races in the world, probably in the Saudi Cup and the Dubai World Cup. So, and that would be great though, Saudi Cup especially, because Romantic Warrior is possibly going there as well, and he was my personal horse of the year through last year, and will probably be so again if he continues what he's doing on the track, which is mesmerising.
Brilliant stuff. Lots of excitement ahead. Constitution Hill, Saudi World Cup, trainers potentially not giving interviews. For all of it, there's no place to be but the front page. We'll be back again next week to discuss all the latest in the racing world. Thank you very much to you for tuning in. Thank you very much to my panellists, and we'll see you next time.